In the early 1970s, every Friday night, America fell in love with the Brady Bunch. And with one face in particular, Maureen McCormick, the radiant golden girl who played Marcia Brady. She was the picture of perfection, the daughter every parent wished for, the smile that defined an era of innocence. But behind that flawless image was a young woman crumbling under the weight of her own reflection. When the camera stopped rolling, the applause faded into silence, replaced by drugs, betrayal, and a darkness that nearly destroyed her. What happened to the perfect girl America once worshipped? How did fame turn her dream into a nightmare of addiction, loss, and redemption? This video reveals the never-before-told truth behind Maureen McCormick's fall from grace, and the painful secret that even Marcia Brady could never hide.
Well, don't we look pretty?
Cut the small talk. What do you got?
Long before Hollywood shaped her into America's sweetheart, Maureen McCormick was a little girl growing up in a house that worshipped appearances, yet hid a haunting secret behind its walls. Her family lived in California's San Fernando Valley, a place of sunshine and quiet streets, but inside their modest home lingered an unspoken fear passed down through generations. Her grandmother had died in a mental institution after contracting syphilis, a tragedy that infected not only the bloodline but the family's conscience. The disease was transmitted to Maureen's mother at birth, a shameful inheritance that the family buried in silence. From childhood, Maureen absorbed that fear, that madness and ruin were waiting inside her, that love could vanish without warning. Her father, a strict, devout man, ruled the household through faith and control. Every prayer before dinner reminded Maureen that perfection was the only way to be worthy of God's approval, or her father's. Her mother, overwhelmed by guilt and mental illness, retreated into clutter and isolation, filling every corner of the house with old boxes and memories she couldn't throw away. To the neighbors, it looked like a home. To Maureen, it felt like a maze of forgotten dreams. Inside that chaos, the young girl learned to survive by smiling, to perform calm where there was none, to sparkle so her mother wouldn't crumble. That instinct would later make her a star, but it was born from fear, not confidence. Each compliment at church or school became a small performance of salvation. When the camera eventually found her, she already knew how to act perfect, because she had spent her whole life pretending. But behind the sparkle of a child actor was a wound invisible to audiences. The terror of being ordinary, of losing control, of disappointing the God and the parents who demanded flawlessness. In that silent pressure cooker, the seed of Maureen's future downfall was already planted, long before cocaine, fame, or heartbreak ever touched her life. Hollywood didn't just open its doors for Maureen McCormick. It swallowed her whole. At only 12 years old, she stepped into a world of blinding lights, endless rehearsals, and the illusion of family that millions of viewers would one day mistake for real life. When the Brady Bunch premiered in 1969, it wasn't just a television show, it was a national ritual. Every Friday night, the McCormicks of San Fernando Valley became the Bradys of America. Maureen, with her honey blonde hair and unshakable smile, became Marcia, the teenage dream of a nation recovering from war and scandal. To a divided America, she represented purity, a symbol of hope in knee-high socks and pastel dresses. But while audiences saw a perfect household, the set was a pressure chamber. The 6 young actors shared long filming days that blurred the lines between acting and reality. Maureen was barely a teenager when she discovered that every smile could be monetized, and every mistake magnified. The writers even borrowed from the cast's real arguments, turning childhood frustration into scripted sibling rivalry. She learned early that pain, when filmed, sold better than joy. Her natural charisma made her the show's golden centerpiece. Magazine covers followed, autograph lines stretched for blocks, and her name became shorthand for perfection. But that adoration came with a cruel cost: her own identity. Maureen wasn't living her life. She was maintaining an image. And once America claimed Marcia Brady, there was no Maureen left to protect. Then, at 15, fate delivered both a gift and a scar. A minor car accident left her with a swollen, bruised nose just before production. Instead of pausing filming, the writers created an episode around it. "Oh, my nose!" which would become one of the most replayed moments in TV history. Millions laughed. For Maureen, it was a lesson. Even pain could be turned into comedy if you smiled through it. Amid the on-set chaos, another story quietly bloomed. A teenage crush between Maureen and Barry Williams, who played her on-screen brother, Greg. It was innocent, electric, and taboo. A love that couldn't exist, not in the Brady house, not under the gaze of producers guarding the show's wholesome image. They kept it secret, sharing brief moments behind stage doors, pretending it was part of the script. When the Brady Bunch ended in 1974, Maureen was 19 and already a veteran of fame. But outside the studio gates, the world didn't see her as a young woman, only as Marcia. Casting directors smiled politely, then asked for someone more serious. To them, she was still the perfect daughter, frozen in television's ember light. Hollywood's golden girl found herself typecast in her own shadow. She tried music, variety shows, commercials, anything to prove she was more than a nostalgic icon. Yet, the more she struggled to reinvent herself, the more the industry reminded her of who she used to be. "Once you've been Marcia Brady," one producer told her, "you can't unring that bell." Ready self, the constant rejection began to chip away at her. Without the structure of filming, she drifted. Friends moved on, the phones stopped ringing, and the silence became unbearable. Fame had been her identity, her family, her religion, and now it was gone. Her parents couldn't understand why their daughter, adored by millions, seemed emptier than ever. But Maureen knew she had lived half her life as a character, and no one had ever loved the girl behind the script. One morning, as she stared at her reflection, she realized she didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. The makeup, the smile, the expectations, all belonged to Marcia. The real Maureen was somewhere buried beneath the applause, gasping for air. And when the applause finally stopped, she went looking for something else to fill the silence. Something stronger, faster, and more dangerous than love or fame could ever give. It wouldn't be long before she found it. Hollywood fame fades fast, but its ghosts linger. When the Brady Bunch ended, Maureen McCormick fell into a silence more deafening than applause. The call stopped, the lights dimmed, and she was left with a single haunting question. Who am I when no one's watching? In that emptiness, temptation found her. At first, it was just parties. Neon nights in Laurel Canyon, where music legends mixed with broken stars. Cocaine was passed around like candy, the unspoken cure for loneliness. To Maureen, it felt like control. A quick burst of confidence, the return of that bright Marcia smile. But what began as escape soon became obsession. The more she used, the further she drifted from reality. Producers noticed. Her once steady career derailed overnight. Late arrivals, missed auditions, lies told to cover the addiction. Friends vanished one by one. She remembers standing in front of a mirror, watching herself powder another lie, whispering, "Just this time, and I'll stop tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. Then came the meeting that should have changed her life. A casting with Steven Spielberg for Raiders of the Lost Ark. She showed up pale, sleepless, her hands trembling. Spielberg looked at her for a long moment, then silently handed her an orange. A wordless act of pity. Maureen later said that was the moment she realized how far she had fallen. He didn't see Marcia Brady. He saw a girl wasting away. They say, and I welcome Period to Redder. By 21, she had endured 3 abortions, each one carving deeper into the guilt that already haunted her. "I lived like there was no tomorrow," she wrote later. "And I almost proved myself right." Dealers became her family, hotel rooms her sanctuary. One night, out of money and desperate, she admitted trading sex for drugs. An act she described not as rebellion, but survival. The spiral was merciless. Cocaine, quaaludes, and prescription pills blurred her reality. Some mornings, she couldn't remember where she'd been. Others, she woke beside strangers whose names she didn't know. The girl who once symbolized innocence had become a shadow moving through Hollywood's underbelly. Even her family began to fear her. Her father, once proud, called late at night to beg her to come home. "You're killing yourself, Maureen," he said, "and we can't watch anymore." But she couldn't stop. The drugs had replaced faith, replaced love. They promised peace and delivered nothing but emptiness. Desperate to heal, she turned to Dr. Eugene Landy, the controversial therapist known for curing, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. Landy promised salvation through radical treatment. Instead, he drowned her in medications and control. "He put me on so many drugs," she later confessed. "I didn't know if I was coming or going." The therapy became another cage, a chemical version of the fame she once fled. At her lowest, she was unrecognizable, frail, paranoid, haunted by the reflection of a girl she used to be. Studio executives whispered that she was done. One even told her bluntly, "You'll never work in this town again." Those words became the cruel echo that followed her everywhere. A death sentence for the little girl who once believed fame meant forever. The final blow came quietly. A phone call informing her she'd been replaced in a new project because insurance wouldn't cover her. Translation: she was too unstable to trust. Maureen hung up and stared at the wall for hours. That night, she thought about ending it. Instead, she prayed for the first time in years. Not for success, not for forgiveness, but simply to wake up the next morning alive. And somehow, she did. But the woman who opened her eyes that day wasn't the same one America remembered. The girl who used to make the nation laugh now trembled in anonymity, trapped between who she was and who the world wanted her to be. The drugs had taken her beauty, her reputation, and nearly her sanity. Yet, beneath the wreckage, a faint pulse remained. The desperate will to survive. It was there, in the ashes of her own legend, that Maureen McCormick would finally begin to rebuild. But before rebirth comes reckoning, and the world would soon witness both. The morning she decided to stop using, there was no dramatic scene, no police, no intervention. Just a quiet realization. If she didn't change, she would die. Maureen McCormick, once America's sweetheart, looked around her apartment. Ashtrays overflowing, mirrors dusted with white, the ghost of Marcia Brady staring back from the TV, and whispered, "I'm done." If you don't mind, but walking away from addiction was harder than walking away from fame. Her body rebelled, her mind screamed. Nights turned into tremors, days into hallucinations. She could hear the audience laughter in her head, cruel and distorted. For 6 years, she had been chained to cocaine and pills, for 10 to bulimia and shame. The detox felt like dying in reverse, the light returning too slowly to bear. Then, in 1985, a twist of fate brought her a lifeline. His name was Michael Cummings, a former actor turned recovering addict. He saw through her trembling hands and hollow eyes. Their first conversation wasn't about Hollywood or the past. It was about survival. "If we don't save ourselves," he told her, "no one else can." That sentence, simple and steady, became her first anchor in years. They married that same year. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was a pact. He kept her away from parties, away from temptation, and closer to faith. For the first time, Maureen felt love without performance. Together, they began rebuilding what fame had destroyed. Trust, health, and a sense of purpose beyond applause. Recovery was messy. There were relapses, therapy, nights of panic when she would wake screaming from dreams of overdose. But step by step, she learned to live again. She began attending 12-step meetings under her real name, not as Marcia. When people recognized her, she didn't hide. "Yes," she'd say, "that was me. But I'm trying to be someone better now." If you don't mind, Hollywood, of course, didn't rush to forgive. Casting directors labeled her unstable, and tabloids treated her sobriety like a spectacle. Yet, little by little, she fought her way back. In 1987, she appeared in Return to Horror High, followed by A Very Brady Christmas, 1988. Viewers were stunned. She was older, wiser, her smile softer, no longer a mask, but a scar healed over. The comeback wasn't about fame. It was about reclaiming the part of herself that addiction had tried to erase. "I didn't want to be Marcia again," she later said. "I just wanted to be Maureen. Alive, sober, and honest." She said is a Reading one. Still, life tested her. The 1,990 seconds brought heartbreak and disappointment. Her attempt at a country music career. The album When You Get a Little Lonely, 1995. Flopped commercially. Critics mocked it, labeling her the nostalgia act that wouldn't die. she felt the sting, but this time she didn't run. Instead, she turned the ridicule into reflection. Maybe the world didn't need another Marsha Brady, she wrote, but maybe it needed a survivor. In Nextwation, tragedy struck again when her mother's mental illness worsened. The woman who had once demanded perfection slipped deeper into hoarding and paranoia before passing away in 2004. For Maureen, it was both an ending and an echo, a reminder of how fragile redemption can be. Yet her grief didn't break her. It hardened her resolve. She forgave her mother, her father, even the industry that had abandoned her. Forgiveness, she discovered, was its own kind of freedom. In 2007, the world met Maureen McCormick again. Not in a sitcom, but on VH1's Celebrity Fit Club. There, she spoke openly about her decades-long battle with addiction and food disorders. Viewers expecting scandal found instead a woman disarming in her honesty. For years, she said on camera, I punished myself for not being perfect. Now I'm learning to be real. Over the course of the show, she lost 23% of her body weight, but the real transformation wasn't physical. It was spiritual. That same year, she released her memoir, Here's the Story, Surviving Marsha Brady and Finding My True Voice. The title alone said everything. That the girl behind the smile had finally taken back her narrative. In the book, she revealed her darkest moments without shame, the abortions, the drugs, the nights of despair. Yet readers didn't see a fallen star. They saw a woman who had lived through every contradiction of fame and still found grace. The memoir became a New York Times bestseller, praised for its candor and vulnerability. Today, Maureen lives quietly with Michael, the man who stood beside her when the world turned away. She still works occasionally, appearing in nostalgic reunions and interviews, but the spotlight no longer defines her. She speaks at recovery groups, mentors young actors, and advocates for mental health awareness, causes she once embodied without understanding. If my story helps one person step away from the edge, she said, then every mistake was worth it. Yes, looking back, her life reads like a cautionary tale written in reverse. Fame first, identity later. The perfection America worshipped nearly killed her, but the truth she embraced saved her. She learned that redemption isn't about returning to who you were. It's about becoming someone you can finally live with. The same cameras that once captured her as the embodiment of innocence would one day record her speaking about brokenness and healing. And in that contrast lies her legacy. Proof that light can still exist in those who have walked through darkness. In a culture still obsessed with flawless faces and curated lives, Maureen McCormick stands as a quiet rebellion. A woman who dared to tell the truth in an industry built on pretending. I spent half my life trying to be perfect, she once said, and the other half learning that I didn't have to be. It's frank to replaying. The blonde in Tenement. Her story isn't about the fall of America's golden girl. It's about the rise of a real woman. Imperfect, forgiven, and finally free.